Hi guys, my name is Girish, the host for Back to Basics. Today, I've explained earlier today that we are speaking with Laura Brandao, and we're talking about saying yes. Is that a metaphor, or is that an actual do we say yes or do we say no? Well, we'll get to the details with Laura regarding those details. And then she has a book also that we're going to talk about that. And then we'll talk about something else, whatever comes into this episode. And it's going to be exciting today. I'm sure it is. Because you know what? The power house that we have right now with Laura, it seems like it's great. I've seen her videos, YouTube videos. You should actually subscribe to that. But I'm telling you, it's just amazing. Laura, thank you for coming to Back to Basics.
I am happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get to the basics of anything, Laura, what does Back to Basics mean to you?
Back to basics is, I think, as humans, we try to overcomplicate and we try to actually put more thought and more of our own spin into everything. But if you take a look at how we're created
Yeah,
as children, as initially coming onto this earth, everything that we need to know is inbred in us.
yeah.
But we actually overcomplicate things by not following what was given to us at birth.
Is that a shame that we actually have to overthink it nowadays, and go back to the basics? And I think the times I think the world just took a reboot of this whole virus it's been going on. Is it a shame that we had to think now and we couldn't think of it back in the centuries ago, or I should say
I
years
think
ago?
it built up. I think it built up over time
Yeah,
because we had it very simplistic many, 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 many years ago and generations ago.
yeah,
But as things became faster and faster, and the technology that we thought was helping us
yeah.
actually took away some of our basic instincts and changed our brains to always be overcomplicating things. So I think you're right. I think that reboot had to happen to show us that we have to go back to basics to truly appreciate our normal basic human lives.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with that. Thank you so much for that insight because I was thinking in the same way, and I'm so glad that you're on the same page as me regarding this whole definition that we're talking about, the reboot of the world, or a reboot of the mind, or the reboot of the mindset, and pivot over to the new change. Hopefully, the new change will happen. So, Laura, first of all, thank you again for coming on my show and making this brighter for me and definitely for my audience who's viewing and listening at the same time. So, is this a metaphor or is this an actual? Do we actually say yes? Because there's a lot of things that
No,
we
it
can
does.
say no to. Like you're on
Correct.
drugs, and is that going to be a yes or is that a no? So explain
No.
that. Explain that.
Yes, it doesn't actually mean to say yes to everything.
Yeah,
What you're saying yes to is being open to every single moment of your life.
yeah,
Because a lot of times, again, as our human brains, we are automatically defensive of normal things that are happening to us.
yeah,
When we meet someone, we actually kind of put up our defense of, will this person ask me for something? Will this person try to sell me something?
yeah,
Will this person bring a negative light into my life? So by saying yes every day, you are actually opening yourself up to living in that moment and allowing things to take its course with no preconceived notions or expectations. So just enjoying that moment without going into it already making a decision.
yeah. So is it the same thing that when you go to a restaurant and instead of taking a picture of the food and put it on the Instagram, you're saying just sit down and enjoy the moment instead of actually, you know, put it on there and say how many likes and dislikes do I have?
Exactly. That is exactly right. And it's so interesting. That goes back to what we were just speaking about. Years ago, you would just enjoy. Now it's all setting it up so
Yeah.
that you can post it so other people can feel like you are living your best life.
Yeah.
So we actually don't enjoy the moment. We only do the moment in order to put it on our highlight reel so other people will believe that we are living our best life.
Yeah. Yeah. So Laura, thank you so much for that definition of that, because you know what? We could say yes to a lot of things. We could say no to a lot of things, but I think it's a metaphor. So I want to make sure and we're clear to my audience and my listeners that yes is a metaphor, right?
Correct.
And try to understand that. So people they take it literally, and we want to
But
make
I do say yes to life.
yeah,
Living, I was telling someone the other day
yeah,
that I will not allow or give up one of my days to anyone. What that means is that every single one of us has a certain number of days. Some
yeah,
will have more days, some will have less days, right?
yeah,
But I know this day I will not give it over to anything that is not within my frame or aligned to me. So I am saying yes to living today, because that's the only thing I can be guaranteed is right
yeah.
now. I'm going to say yes to this moment.
Yeah, that you know what, that is a defined thing. I mean, it needs to be said yes every day, right? I mean, yeah, it's a shame people they realize after when someone passes away and
Right.
they're like, you know what, I need to change my life. Why can't we just think from day one when we were born? But it seems like that we're daredevils when we were younger, and I think we slowly mature a little later. So I think we need to teach our even youngsters to think the way we're thinking now. Don't you agree with that?
Well, the unfortunate thing is when you're little children,
Yes.
you do live every day because you have no fear,
That's
and
right.
you have no you're not scared of how am I going to pay the mortgage, or
That's
what
right.
kind of car do I drive, or being compared to someone else.
That's
But
right.
as you come into your teenage years, all of a sudden your mindset starts to change,
Change.
and then all of a sudden the hourglass gets tipped over, and now there's this time of, well, I better go to college, and I better get married, and I better have a child, and I better buy a house, and I better make sure that all of these things start happening. So unfortunately, you're not living every day and saying yes because you have this hourglass being flipped over, staying on someone else's timeline. But that's the wrong way to think about it, because when you take that stress off of your shoulder and you allow yourself to enjoy that day to the fullest, things will fall in line for you.
Yeah.
It's that fear that holds you back from actually living that day of yes.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. I hope my listeners agree with that. And guys, if you do agree or disagree, please comment and review and tell me that if you agree or disagree. Because it seems like Laura and I need to know from the world and from all people that we agree with this statement because it needs to be brought out. I don't think we have said this enough in many different platforms and many different people around us. So it needs to be aware. So Laura, the book that you came up with, it's not something that you just woke up and said, I'm gonna come up with a book, right? There has to be some trigger or something that it triggered you to maybe it was annoyance, it was maybe aggravating or something that it just triggered you saying that I need to start a book. So what was your thought process on this?
Well, where Say Yes Every Day came from was back in 2018. Now, just going back a little bit, I am the president and partner of a national mortgage firm. That is my main job role within the world. So in 2018, I had built a company. Every single day I was the first one in and the last one out, workaholic syndrome of being this creator of this business. But in 2018, there was something called margin compression. And
Hmm.
what that means is that on each loan, you would make less and less as the months were going on because the margin bonds were compressed.
Right.
So I was faced with, I built this company and I needed to figure out how to double my production. Well, how do you double your production? Well, you need more sales, you need more loans. And
Yeah.
I got a phone call from a gentleman in the mortgage industry that said, Laura, we would love for you to come and speak at a mortgage conference. Now, you would think, sure, you run a mortgage company. Of course, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I had never, ever gone outside of my company. I had never been on a stage. I had never been interviewed. I had never done anything like that. But I had to say yes because I was concerned about getting more business.
Hmm.
Well, a couple weeks before the conference, I chickened out. I literally heard these voices in the back of my head going, do not get up on that stage, Laura. Like, you have no idea what you're doing. How are you going to get up there?
Right.
So 3 weeks before, I figured out a whole plan of someone else was going to go and do that.
Mm.
And that gentleman said no to me.
Mm.
He said, Laura, you are not having someone else get up on that stage. You are getting up there. You will be amazing. And I need you to do it. And something kind of clicked in my brain. And I thought to myself, you know what? Maybe this person sees something in me. Maybe this person actually believes that I would do a great job if I got up on that stage.
Sure.
And so I did. And after I finished, I had a line of women down the aisle waiting to speak to me.
Sure.
And I turned to them and I said, how can I help you? And they said, Laura, we have never seen a woman mortgage executive up on the stage before, and we want to thank you. And on that plane ride home from California, I made a promise that I will never let fear hold me back from anything anymore. And I started saying yes. And a ripple of things started to occur. The more I said yes to being open to the opportunity, the more people came into my life, the more new experiences happened, the more opportunities came about. And all of these different things started to spiral in a positive way in my life. And I decided I was going to start blogging. And every single day I would hold myself accountable of what did I say yes to today? And it doesn't necessarily mean I said yes to jumping out of an airplane. I could say yes to listening to someone. Right. I could say yes to everyone in my family turning our phones off for 5 hours and just sitting around a table and talking to each other. I could say yes to staring at the sunrise. It doesn't have to be monumental getting up on a stage. It could be the little things that change your whole dynamic of a relationship, whether it's personal or with business. And so when COVID hit, I decided I was going to take those experiences and look back at how it changed my life and encourage others to be open that it can also change their lives. And so I wrote the book during COVID.
And that's how it all happened. Thank you so much, Laura, for that. So if you don't mind, just give me a second. Let me just talk to my listeners here 1 second. So guys, think about this. In 2018, yes, we did get hit by COVID. Did she actually get blocked down? Yes, a little. But what she did is she learned from the lessons of someone saying that, you know what, hell no, you cannot do this. So that's where she changed her life. She pivoted over. She actually wrote down, put a journal saying, you know what, I'm going to put a journal and make several chapters out of this book and put her life into that book. And then she made her motto, say yes every day. You can do that too, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure anyone can. Now, if anyone can write a book, is everyone. Let's put it that way. Everyone has a voice. Everyone has a writing skill. If they don't have a writing skill, you have a voice. You can also do an audiobook. That's just an FYI for you guys because there's no limitations for any learnings. So Laura, on this day when you started this book, okay, now, is this book more dedicated to women or is it for any gender? Or how do you start this? Because it looks like a woman actually came up to you and started this whole thing, right? So is it more for women or is it for everyone? Or
I mean, I will tell you there's men in my industry that have read the book and it certainly connects with them, but I would think more women than men would connect to it. And that's primarily because you have to also remember, I came into my industry, a very male dominated industry. So
Yeah.
some of my experiences and some of my journey was navigating my way as a young woman without mentorship back then, because there wasn't a lot of women executives but when I arrived.
Sure.
And so a lot of the book, it does journal my story, which is going to resonate probably more with women. But it's not an anti-man book, male book,
Of
but
course.
it certainly would probably connect more with women.
Of course, because you know what, you are right. I've been in the technology field for the last 20 plus years, and most of the 500 Fortune companies so far, knock on wood, that I have worked with, there has not been enough leadership on the women's side. That is for sure. And I think somehow, somewhere, we're not saying that they're not capable. I think they just not had the push to
Correct.
go and I guess fight is the right word, or break the barrier is the right word. I'm not really sure what word we should be using, but it is that change needs to happen somewhere. I have
and
seen.
it is getting there. It is getting there. I will tell you, it is starting to make progress,
Yes,
not in monumental leaps and bounds,
that's right. Yeah,
small progress, but that's one of the things I'm very dedicated to now. I'm the chair of multiple women groups with trying to teach. And it's interesting because my one of my children is in the technology field. And it's funny that I'm kind of watching his progression as a young gentleman versus what I remember being a female in my industry.
mhm,
And some of it comes down to, it's difficult for a young woman to walk into a networking event by herself.
yeah,
It is a little awkward for a woman that, again, the way she's dressed, the way she looks. Sometimes it's difficult to go up to a group of men and have a conversation because there is a male female dynamic still.
yeah.
And sometimes it's uncomfortable.
Mhm.
So I work with the women on how to handle situations like that and how to be able to put yourself out there and feel comfortable. And then the other thing is that if you are a young mom, sometimes it's difficult to go to those after hour events
Of course.
because of babysitting and daycare and things like that.
Yeah.
So these are all the things that, progress is happening. That's the good news. And the world is ready for it. And we all know businesses benefit from having a balance of male and female
Of course.
leadership.
Of course, because you need a sense of opinion between the both sides to get the business running. Because it could be any way form. Uh, so the question now is, there's a lot of leadership uh, in the organization. Let me just give you an example, right? And you have, let's say, with this example, you have four male, VPs or AVPs or whatever word you want to use on the leadership side, right? And then you have one lady also. So you have a total of five people and four male and one female. Do you think it's going to be a little over between the four men into that one lady and not making that right decision, do you think? Or do you think that she does has the power? That's just an example.
Yeah, and I can actually, that's very similar to my company. At my company, there are five male partners and
Yeah,
me.
yeah,
So that's pretty much, the way it is. And I will tell you that you do have to know how to maneuver that,
right.
because men and women do think and approach things a little differently.
Sure.
And it's interesting, I'm good friends with a woman that wrote a book called Gender Physics.
Okay.
And the reason why I became friends with her is because I read her book and I reached out to her. And it's a fascinating book because it tells about how we all have male and female energy. Every single one of us, whether you're a female or a male, we have both energies.
Hmm.
And we have to know in what situations do we use our male energy
Mhm.
and in what situations do we use our female energy.
Mhm.
And if you can learn how to balance yourself to know when you're going to use one and when you're going to use the other, you can be an extremely successful leader. And it's all about self-awareness and knowing when it's time to use one or the other. And that's why I don't think it matters if there's this many men or this many women. I
Right.
think it's being in tune with yourself and knowing when it's appropriate to act one way versus another way, or have this opinion versus another. If we always sway one way, where, if I'm always using female energy, well, it's going to be very difficult in a boardroom. That's not going
Sure.
to work.
That's not
It's not going to work with for me.
right.
But if I went all the way to the other side and I used all male energy, people would be like, man, why is this woman coming on so strong?
Yeah.
So you have to know how to balance yourself and know when it's appropriate to use one or the other.
But then you know what? There's no class or like that will teach you how to,
No.
to maneuver as you're saying, right? So do you think we need courses to do that? Because it seems like not a lot of people are trained this way, right?
It's a very good point. I think it's something we all should look into and be, again, you have to be open and receptive to it, right? Anyone can Google things or read a book or whatever,
That's
but
right.
you have to be okay with understanding that as a man,
Yeah.
sometimes you have to use female energy. And
Yeah.
because I think women have figured out sometimes you have to take on the male role,
Sure.
but it's the same thing for the gentleman.
That-
Sometimes the gentlemen have to be very empathetic.
yeah.
And maybe they do need to use some great emotional intelligence when they're working with their teams, right?
Yeah.
So I think both sides need to do that. And to your point, I think every single person in business should. And here's an interesting story. I actually just threw up my motivational Monday videos that I do. I actually just posted this morning. I was traveling to San Diego a couple weeks ago for a speaking event.
Mhm.
And I happened to be sitting next to this young gentleman. And I was like, oh, why are you going to San Diego? And he says, I'm moving to San Diego. I'm like, wow, that's so exciting. Did you get a new job? He's like, I am in a CEO training program.
Okay.
And I'm like, wow, that's fascinating. So I'm asking him all these questions because I'm just curious. And I said, listen, let me ask you, what do you think the two most important things that people need to be a CEO in the 2020s, right?
Mhm.
And he's like, oh, this is easy. He's like, because I hear about this all the time. And I'm like, okay, tell me, I can't wait. And he's like, number one, emotional intelligence. You have to be able to listen,
Mm.
absorb, and communicate based on what you're hearing.
Yeah.
So that's one. And the second thing, you have to be able to network. You have to be able to go up and speak to anyone, have an open conversation, be able to bond and build and form strong relationships.
Mhm.
So think about that, right?
Mhm.
Back in, let's say, the 90s, early 2000s,
Mhm.
I'm sure that's not what the two most important things for a CEO
No.
were.
No.
Not at all.
Not at all.
So look at how this new generation, now that gentleman was 32. I actually asked him, I'm like, how old are you? I'm curious, the CEO, he was 32.
Mhm.
So that generation, look at how different it is from when like we were, coming in at that age.
That's right.
It was certainly nothing to do with networking or emotional intelligence.
But there's a lot of people in our times, right, or earlier 90s and 2000s, maybe 80s even, right? Not a lot of people are extroverts. They're more
Right.
introverts, right? So then that networking is not going to happen for a lot of different people, right? And then emotion, I think, according to them, business is just business. There's no emotions. So that's how we were kind of brought up back.
That's the way we were back then.
Right.
Correct. Back then.
Exactly.
Correct.
And today, it seems like the business needs to be part of the emotions, and the business needs to be more, networking and
Relationships.
LinkedIn and relationships and social media and hashtag this, hashtag that. So it seems like we're slowly getting there together as one. And you know how ironic it is when you actually said two simple basic things, which is emotion and networking. So it just comes down to back to basics of just getting your answer. And I think that's what your back to basic moment is. Just to find the two great answers, I think. Right?
I agree.
Yeah, yeah. So before I let you go, Laura, any last words that you have for back to basics?
I think it all starts with that with that not overcomplicating. Trust your own gut instinct and your back to basic foundation, because so many of us, we overanalyze and we look for confirmation and we try to get advice from other people. But
Yeah.
most of the answers are right within your own gut instinct and following your basic foundational reaction to things. Trust it. It's there as a guide, but so many times we don't listen to it.
Yeah, it's a shame, but thank you so much, Laura, for making this brighter and saying yes every day. Can we say it one more time? Yes every day.
Say yes every day.
So, Laura, thank you again for coming on my show and making so enjoyable. And God bless. And I will see you whenever I see you, and I'll keep on contacting you. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. It has been truly a pleasure. Take care.
Take care. So, guys, we spoke with Laura today. We talked about the basics of saying yes. Well, it's not actually saying yes, it's actually a metaphor. So, guys, just keep in mind, keep your chin up and go back to your gut and see what your yes moment is. And as always, as usual, there is a quote of the day. The quote of the day is, let me see here. The quote of the day is, I'm a great believer that every yes is a lot more fun than saying no. Of course it is. I mean, that's what she said. So, guys, as usual, as always, what do I always say? Everything in life goes back to basics, and that's what we did today, guys. Guys, you take care, God bless, and keep on supporting me as much as you can. Good comment, bad comments, either way, it'll make my show stronger day by day. Guys, take care, God bless. Next week's episode on Back to Basics.
So by being a little more proactive in thinking about our ethics, where are our lines individually, as a team, as an organization? How might we react in certain situations? Knowing don't take the elevator, take the stairs. Okay, good. I don't have to say, what am I going to do when the alarm goes off? Knowing when I have an ethical challenge, here's how I am going to approach it. Here's the stairwell I can use. Makes it easier so we don't panic. We don't feel that pressure when we face an ethical challenge.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Mark. So I have one last question, if you don't mind. So,
Please.
so the question now I have is, are we coming to a trend that we're working from home? And if we're working from home, how do we calculate that I'm the best or you're the worst or vice versa? How do we tackle that? Because